R&B in the Bahamas.
Global 99.5 FM reminds our listeners that the views and opinions expressed on this show are those of the host and guests and not necessarily the opinions of the owners of Global Communications Network and the operators.
Today can be the turning point in your life by making a simple decision.
Fundamental questions of navigation. Where am I? Where am I going? And how do I get there from here?
I invite the leaders of our planet to ask themselves these three questions before they make any crucial decisions.
But if you don't make decisions, you're going to stay right where you are.
We are all map makers.
We are in a time of transition.
If we're going to change, we have to change the direction that we're going.
Our planet needs leaders who know where they want to go.
When we change the direction we're going, then we want to make sure we're going in the right direction.
Leaders who can see the big picture.
Because if we're not, we're going to either go backwards or we're going to stay where we are.
Recognizing the psychological and the spiritual shifts and changes that need to be made, often from the inside to the outside.
To be able to shape your future, you have to be willing and able to change your paradigm.
Complex journeys require navigation. The path to the truth is one such journey. This is your GPS. Hairstyling services provided by J.D. Edwards Salon and Spa, Palmdale Shopping Plaza, Madera Street. Accessories provided by Chevette Williamson Jewelry. Standout jewelry for standout women. Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to GPS Global Paradigm Shift on Global 99.5 FM. I'm your host, Michelle Malcolm, and as always, it's a pleasure to be in your company today. Thanks so much for tuning in. Jason, you know what you need to do with the camera, right? Welcome to one and all. Those of you listening by radio, you need to twist it some more. Those of you watching via Facebook or YouTube, thank you so much for tuning in and making GPS, that still ain't Santa, but anyway, making GPS a part of your afternoon. I so appreciate you guys. Your support means everything. And I appreciate you being a part of the GPS family. So every Wednesday around these parts, we do what is called a Wellness Wednesday show. And we look at matters that are of importance to your health. And today, of course, is no exception. I'm going to be tackling a subject today that has been plaguing people around the world, but more so particularly people of color, for a very, very long time. We probably all know someone who is either battling with this or who has a loved one who's battling with it. And it's a very debilitating, painful disease for those who are suffering through it. And today we're going to be talking about this issue. And obviously, I'm going to be coming from a position of health as it relates to nutrition. But there are also some new breakthroughs that we're going to be discussing on today's show. So we're going to be looking at all aspects or from all angles of how do we finally put this condition to bed. I am speaking of sickle cell disease. Sickle cell disease, or as it's called by some, sickle cell anemia. This is a disease that has baffled the medical professionals for a long time. They understand what is happening in the body, but don't necessarily understand how to fix it. And, you know, those of us who believe in nutrition and the naturopathic approach, we believe that we have some answers as it relates to that. But I think it's important that we look at all of the developments as to how to bring relief to persons who are suffering from sickle cell disease. So many of us know a little something about it. We know that, generally speaking, a person develops sickle cell disease if their parents are perhaps persons who have the sickle cell trait, but not necessarily the disease, and they come together, and lo and behold, their child ends up with this disease. Um, we're going to look at all of that. And I'm going to be playing quite a number of clips today to help us to get a better understanding of what it is, how it works, what causes it, but more importantly, what treatment options are available, and whether or not this is something that can, in fact, be dealt with using medical nutrition. So this is what we're going to be talking about today. If you know anybody who is suffering from this chronic disease, I want you to please reach out to them and let them know that they need to tune in to GPS today, because we're talking about sickle cell disease, and they may get some information during the show that they will find beneficial. The telephone numbers to call: 3260271, 3260271, 3260272, 3260272. The WhatsApp line for those of you wishing to send a text message, and text messages only, is 8010271, 8010271. So let's dive right in. This first clip is going to explain the methodology, or what sickle cell disease is, what causes it, and it's going to go into a little bit of detail, and hopefully it'll be simple enough that you'll be able to understand it. So let's go to that first clip.
Sickle cell disease is caused by defective hemoglobin, which is the oxygen-carrying protein in red blood cells. Hemoglobin is actually made up of 4 peptide chains, each bound to a heme group. Different hemoglobins have different combinations of these chains. Hemoglobin A, or HbA, made up of 2 alpha-globin and 2 beta-globin peptide chains, is the primary hemoglobin affected in sickle cell. Specifically, the beta-globin chains end up misshapen. And this is because of a mutation in the beta-globin gene, or HBB gene. Sickle cell is an autosomal recessive disease, so a mutation in both copies of the beta-globin gene is needed to get the disease. If the person has just one copy of the mutation and one normal HBB gene, then they're a sickle cell carrier, also called sickle trait. Having sickle trait doesn't cause health problems unless the person's exposed to extreme conditions, like high altitude or dehydration, where some sickle cell disease-like symptoms can crop up. What it does do is decrease the severity of infection by Plasmodium falciparum malaria. So in parts of the world with a high malaria burden, like Africa and pockets of Southern Asia, those with sickle trait actually have an evolutionary advantage. This phenomenon is called heterozygote advantage, and its unfortunate consequence is a high rate of sickle cell disease in people from those parts of the world. Almost always, the sickle cell mutation is a non-conservative missense mutation that results in the 6th amino acid of beta-globin being valine instead of glutamic acid. A non-conservative substitution means that the new amino acid, valine, which is hydrophobic, has different properties than the one it replaced, glutamic acid, which is hydrophilic. A hemoglobin tetramer with 2 alpha-globin and 2 mutated beta-globin proteins is called sickle hemoglobin, or HbS. HbS carries oxygen perfectly well, but when it's deoxygenated, HbS changes its shape, which allows it to aggregate with other HbS proteins and form long polymers that distort the red blood cell into a crescent shape, a process called sickling. Conditions favorable for sickling include acidosis, which decreases hemoglobin's affinity for oxygen, and small, low-flow vessels where red blood cells' hemoglobin molecules have plenty of time to dump lots of oxygen molecules. Repeated sickling of red blood cells damages their cell membranes and promotes premature destruction. Since this happens within the vasculature, it's called intravascular hemolysis. This destruction of red blood cells not only leads to anemia, which is a deficiency in red blood cells, but also means a lot of hemoglobin spilling out. Free hemoglobin in the plasma is bound by a molecule called haptoglobin and gets recycled, which is why a low haptoglobin level is a sign of intravascular hemolysis. Recycling of that heme group yields unconjugated bilirubin, which at high concentration can cause scleral icterus, jaundice, and bilirubin gallstones. To counteract the anemia of sickle cell disease, the bone marrow makes increased numbers of reticulocytes, which are immature red blood cells. This ends up causing new bone formation, and the medullary cavities of the skull can expand outward, which causes enlarged cheeks and a hair-on-end appearance on skull X-ray. Extramedullary hematopoiesis, which is red blood cell production outside the bone marrow, can also happen, most often in the liver, which can cause hepatomegaly. In sickled form, red blood cells tend to get stuck in the capillaries, called vasoocclusion. Starting in infancy, they can clog up blood flow in the bones of the hands and the feet, called dactylitis, or swelling and pain of the digits. Later, they get stuck in other bones, causing sickle cell pain crises, or avascular necrosis of the bone. Red blood cells can also clog up the spleen, which can lead to an infarct of the spleen, as well as an enormous backup of blood in the spleen, called splenic sequestration, a life-threatening complication. Over time, splenic infarcts can lead to an autosplenectomy, where the spleen scars down and fibroses to basically nothing. Having an absent or non-functional spleen means a person's susceptible to encapsulated bacteria, like Streptococcus pneumoniae, Haemophilus influenzae, Neisseria meningitidis, and Salmonella species. Since encapsulated bacteria are normally opsonized and then phagocytized by macrophages in the spleen. It also leaves a person with Howell-Jolly bodies, basophilic nuclear remnants in red blood cells, which can be seen on a peripheral blood smear. Sickled red blood cells can also get stuck in the cerebral vasculature, causing strokes and moya-moya disease, which is named for a puff of smoke collateral vessels that bypass blocked arteries. They can also get stuck in the blood vessels of the lungs, leading to acute chest syndrome. And this is particularly dangerous because it sets up a vicious cycle of congested, deoxygenated red blood cells, preventing other red blood cells from getting oxygen. And this is made worse by the lung's natural tendency for hypoxic vasoconstriction, which is blood vessel constriction in areas of the lungs that are low in oxygen. In addition, clogging in the renal papillae can cause necrosis, which can manifest as hematuria and proteinuria, blood and protein spilling out into the urine. And in men, clogging of the vasculature of the penis can cause priapism, a painful and prolonged erection. Given all these symptoms, it's important to diagnose sickle cell as early as possible. So it's included in the newborn blood spot screen in some countries, and can also be identified with a blood smear, looking for sickled cells, or by identifying HBS using protein electrophoresis. The factors that cause red blood cells to sickle, which are hypoxia, dehydration, and/or acidosis, can all be improved with oxygen and fluids, which are the mainstays of treatment. In addition, opioids are usually used to manage pain, and antibiotics are used to treat any underlying bacterial infections causing acute chest syndrome. Occasionally, blood transfusions are also used, but the risk of multiple transfusions include iron overload and developing immunologic intolerance to foreign blood. Finally, children with sickle cell typically get prophylaxis with penicillin and an additional polysaccharide vaccine against Streptococcus pneumoniae to help prevent sepsis and meningitis with encapsulated bacteria. Another preventative medicine is hydroxyurea, which works by increasing the amount of gamma globin, which results in more fetal hemoglobin, or HbF. Fetal hemoglobin is made up of 2 alpha and 2 gamma globin chains, so it doesn't include the mutated beta globins. Since it can't polymerize, it gets in the way of HbS polymers being made and prevents sickling. HbF is the primary hemoglobin at birth, which explains why sickle cell symptoms don't happen until a few months of life, when adult hemoglobin starts to predominate, which contains the mutated beta globin. More rarely, bone marrow transplants have been used in some patients, and given that sickle cell involves a single point mutation, gene therapy is another option that's being researched.
So during the show, we're going to talk about all of those therapies that video would have just mentioned. And I know he got very technical, and hopefully we'll be able to provide information that will help it to be easier to understand and digest as we go throughout the show. But we definitely will be taking a closer look at some of those treatment options that he mentioned, including the transfusions, the bone marrow transplants, and new technology as it relates to stem cell therapy and gene therapy. But this show would not be what it is if that is where we stopped. So, of course, we are going to be looking at the nutritional component of what contributes to this, because there's a pretty good understanding as of today what is actually happening, as you would have just heard in that video, a very detailed explanation of what actually happens to the body when a person is suffering from sickle cell disease. But you would have noticed that once again, there is this void when it comes to getting to ground zero. Okay, we understand what is happening. The question is, why is that happening? What is the root cause of why someone would develop this condition? We understand what the condition is. We understand what happens in the body when a person does develop this condition. But what we have not been hearing is what is ground zero. At what point do we look at what led to what is happening? Whether that be in the body of the parent that has the trait, or whether it be in the body of the child that develops the full out disease. What is ground zero in this whole scenario? That is what has been missing, where there seems to be, some confusion. Some say, well, it's a gene thing. But as you'll hear in at least one of the clips today, there may be some holes in that theory. And even if it were, what caused that gene to go in the wrong direction? One thing we know for sure is it is a mutation problem. But again, what caused the mutation? So these are the things that we're going to be looking at today. Now, that video went into a lot of detail about what is happening in the body and what causes it and all the various symptoms. But I'm going to try to break it down as much as I can, make it more digestible. I don't know if that's a word. Make it easier to digest, and less technical in the explanations. And we're also going to hear from a real life story as to what a particular young man and his family dealt with as he was diagnosed with sickle cell disease at an early age, and the treatment option that they chose to go with, which turned out to be very successful for them. So sickle cell, as you would have just heard in that clip, sickle cell hemoglobin forms in these stiff rods within the red blood cell, thus changing the shape into a crescent form or a sickle shape. And this is problematic because once that happens, then it is very difficult for the body to receive the oxygen that is needed throughout the body via hemoglobin protein in the red blood cells. So apart from the body not getting sufficient oxygen, you run into problems when all of these sickle cells start to stick together and make it difficult for blood flow. And now you have chronic pain. And as I would have heard, as I was researching for the show, I came across a video of a young lady who is a sufferer. And the person who was interviewing her said, she was talking about the chronic pain. And the person who was interviewing her said, well, where does it hurt? And she said, all over. And she stressed that. She said, it's no, oh, it only hurts my joints, or it only hurts this, or it only hurts that. It hurts everywhere. So imagine living with chronic pain every single day you wake up. And some people have learned to manage it better than others. So for some, it's not so much, they've learned how to control it. But if you imagine those who have not learned how to manage this disease effectively, that every day you wake up with chronic pain. Another person actually said in one video that I came across that initially they would be going into the hospital with these, episodes, and people would not believe them. They would dismiss it as, this is all in your head, because they couldn't quite understand what was happening with the person. And so they were talking about how difficult it was, particularly as children, when nobody believes you that you're experiencing this pain, but yet the pain is there day in and day out. So that must be very, very difficult to deal with. So what happens is when the sickle, when the vessels become the sickle shape and become these stiff rods, they're not flexible, and they attach themselves to vessel walls and lead to blockage that slows or halts blood flow, and therefore oxygen cannot reach nearby tissues. And, pain is a major part of dealing with this disease, because the lack of oxygen is associated with the sudden onset of severe pain known as pain crises. And when a person has sickle cell disease and experiences these sudden attacks, they most often will require treatment at hospital. So this disease is or can be apparent at birth. Although adolescents and adults may suffer from chronic ongoing pain, most young children with sickle cell disease remain pain-free between pain crisis episodes. Early symptoms include fatigue, jaundice, or yellowish tone in the skin and the eyes, the whites of the eyes. Over time, you're talking about the bones, brain, eyes, heart, joints, kidneys, liver, lungs, skin, spleen, in the case of male's penis, all may be harmed by the red blood cell sickling and poor levels of oxygen throughout the body. The lifetime of sickle cell is only the lifetime of sickle cells is only about 10 to 20 days, whereas normal red blood cells thrive between 90 to 100 days. And this is because sickle cells are unable to change their shape easily and burst apart, which in itself is another problem. So a person with sickle cell disease has a lower red blood cell count, which can lead to anemia and lethargy. So we're going to take a quick break. On the other side of the break, we're going to hear from a young man who was diagnosed at a very young age with sickle cell disease and the treatment option that his family decided to go with to help him to overcome this. We're going to talk about that and more on the other side of the break. This is GPS. Stay with us.
Understanding your microbiome, also known as your gut ecosystem, can change everything you thought you knew about nutrition, digestion, immunity, and metabolism. Keeping your gut ecosystem healthy and balanced is essential. Ultimate Microbiome by Longevity was specifically formulated to optimize this ecosystem. It provides the advanced support your gut needs through prebiotic, probiotic, and postbiotic supplementation. Our unique blend of probiotics includes Lactobacillus and Plantarum, healthy bacteria that can help prevent harmful bacteria from taking over your gut. Increasing your gut's population of beneficial bacteria creates a more balanced gut microbiome, which has been shown to aid in weight loss, skin health, sleep, mood, and may even help with seasonal allergies. Ultimate Microbiome also promotes the production of postbiotics. Postbiotics are key to help regulate your gastrointestinal health. To enhance digestion, Digizyme Multi-Enzyme Complex, a blend of 5 specific enzymes, has been added to Ultimate Microbiome. It can help break down food so your body can better absorb nutrients. Plus, we've added our proprietary I-26 Hyperimmune Egg Powder to aid in the elimination of disease-causing gut bacteria and help your body balance its immune response. Ultimate Microbiome, the scientific, proprietary, and holistic approach to gut health that helps optimize your body's entire gut ecosystem. To learn more, contact your longevity associate.
Welcome to Sunshine Auto, the hardest place on the planet for rims, paint, and tires.
We are your auto superstore for rims, Lexani, Azaras, Trueform, Western, Lux, Fuel, Trackline, Tough, Rough Racing, Velocity, Mud, All-Terrain, and low-profile tires, cars, homes, and commercial window tinting. At Sunshine Auto, we put God first and customer is king.
Blessed love.
To stay healthy, it's crucial to make sure you get the nutrition you need every day. But it's difficult to get all your recommended vitamins and minerals from food alone. Even in the United States, 94% of people are deficient in at least one nutrient. Beyond Tangy Tangerine 2.0 by Longevity is a simple, convenient, and affordable way to help your body get the essential nutrients it needs. It's an advanced plant-driven multivitamin mineral complex that contains certified organic whole foods, trace minerals, and antioxidants. BTT 2.0 supports your body's natural defense system with a proprietary blend of energy-boosting and body-loving nutrients, plus prebiotics, probiotics, amino acids, and enzymes that support digestion. With an unusually high ORAC score of 8,000, you get even more antioxidants to help combat free radicals that can cause damage to your cells. But to get the most benefit and value from any multivitamin, your body must be able to break down the nutrients so you can fully absorb them. Otherwise, they'll just pass through your system without doing any good. Beyond Tangy Tangerine 2.0 was specially formulated with synergizing cofactors to ensure you get maximum nutrient absorption. Beyond Tangy Tangerine 2.0 is the easiest way to give your body the balance and complete daily vitamin mineral supplement it needs for optimal support of your overall health. To learn more, contact your longevity associate.
This portion of GPS is brought to you by Tiki Bikini Hut at Junkanoo Beach. Great food, cool tropical drinks, and family fun in the sun. Welcome back to GPS, Global Paradigm Shift on Global 99.5 FM. Michelle Malcolm here in your company on this Wellness Wednesday. Our topic today is sickle cell disease. So, advances in the diagnosis and cure of sickle cell disease has improved tremendously the lifespan of persons with sickle cell disease. During the past few decades, the average lifespan expectancy now is up to 40 to 60 years, whereas just a few years ago, it was as low as 14. Effective treatments reduce symptoms and extend life. Early diagnosis and regular follow-up care can prevent potential complications. And moreover, practicing a healthy lifestyle is important, including eating a healthy diet, getting lots of rest, and regular physical activity to help prevent and control complications. So there have been many advances in sickle cell disease treatment and options. And here now is a video to tell you a little bit about some of what's available now today.
About 100 years ago, a curious blood disease was discovered that was characterized by the presence of peculiarly shaped red blood cells, which had a crescent or sickle shape instead of the normal disc-shaped cells. This disease was coined sickle cell disease, or SCD. As the disease progresses, SCD patients experience increasingly debilitating pain and damage to the brain, liver, heart, lung, and other organs. Today, SCD affects 100,000 people in the US alone. Over 40 years ago, it was discovered that SCD was an inherited disease passed on from parent to child if both parents carried a copy of the sickling gene, a mutated version of the beta-globin gene. Beta-globin is one of the 4 core units of hemoglobin, which is essential to carry oxygen to tissues throughout the body. Normal disc-shaped red blood cells are flexible and can easily move through large and small blood vessels to deliver oxygen to tissues. In sickle cell disease, mutations in beta-globin turn hemoglobin into stiff rods, changing the normal disc-shaped red blood cells into a sickle form. These inflexible, sickle-shaped red blood cells can stick to vessel walls, causing a blockage that slows or stops blood flow, preventing oxygen from reaching all tissues and causing pain and organ damage. In 1973, the life expectancy for sickle cell disease was 14 years. Since then, much progress has been made. SCD patients in the US can expect to live 40 to 60 years, although with recurring chronic pain. Sickle cell disease can be cured by blood stem cell transplantation, where a patient's diseased bone marrow, where the red blood cells are produced, is eliminated and blood-forming cells, including stem cells from the bone marrow of a healthy donor, are introduced. Over time, they will produce healthy disc-shaped red blood cells to replace the sickle ones, curing SCD. However, access to bone marrow from someone who is a perfect immune system match is extremely rare. Only 10 to 15% of sickle cell patients find that perfect bone marrow to cure their disease. But for the 85 to 90% of those who don't, stem cell therapy offers the best immediate hope. To overcome this, a group of scientists led by Don Cohn at the Broad Stem Cell Research Center at UCLA are using a combination of stem cell research and gene therapy to make patients their own red blood cell donors, using the patient's own stem cells. Using funding from California's Proposition 71, the UCLA team is enriching blood stem cells from the bone marrow of SCD patients and introducing a modified version of the beta-globin gene. The engineered stem cells make red blood cells with the modified beta-globin, which blocks sickling of red blood cells, which makes the red blood cells disc-shaped in a laboratory petri dish. The engineered stem cells are then returned to the patient, where they should start producing new disc-shaped red blood cells containing the modified beta-globin gene, eventually replacing all of the sickled red blood cells. The scientists have tested this technique in a mouse model of sickle cell, where the modified stem cells created disc-shaped red blood cells and cured SCD. A human clinical trial is currently underway at UCLA to test this approach in SCD patients. Although early attempts to use gene therapy to cure disease were not successful, new techniques to introduce genes into stem cells have made this process much safer and effective. In fact, with the support of donors, the NIH, and California's Proposition 71 funds, a fatal disease called SCID, or the bubble baby disease, has been cured by a similar approach to replace a missing gene in stem cells. This approach was proven to be safe by Dr. Don Cohn and his team in a clinical trial at UCLA last year. All 23 babies who were born without working immune systems were cured of this life-threatening disease after receiving their own modified stem cells. The implications of this work are significant. With an efficient way to engineer stem cells, we can replace abnormal cells in many diseases, including neurodegenerative, metabolic, or autoimmune diseases. But only with support for biomedical research can we make this possible. As scientists and patient advocates build on the progress that Proposition 71 funding has enabled, we must keep the momentum going, understanding that there is still much work to be done. We must remember that human trials will celebrate successes, but barriers will surface, along with complications and challenges. So patience and understanding of the scientific discovery process are essential.
So as you can hear from that clip, there's a lot of really great work going on, a lot of hopeful research going on that could really bring much relief to persons suffering from this disease. And we're going to hear a little later on in the show from the head of that study, Dr. Cohn, that clip would have mentioned from the UCLA study and research that is happening about the work that they're doing there. But you would have noticed in that clip that they mentioned that whereas you get really good results if you can find somebody that has bone marrow that matches exactly, or that your body won't reject, only 10 to 15% of persons fall into that category. Out of everybody suffering from this disease, in other words, only 10 to 15% are actually able to find an adequate match for bone marrow transplant. So even though that is proven to be very effective, it only works for a handful of people. Well, And the clip that we're going to play next, this particular family found themselves in a position where their eldest child developed sickle cell disease. And the question was then raised as to do we now subject one of our younger children to the difficult process of taking bone marrow from that child to help the older child. It was a question of morality, a question of finances, a question of love. Is it fair to the younger child to pretty much, use their health to help the older child? What will that mean for the health of the younger child in the long run? These are some of the difficult questions that have to be answered by families who are facing this difficult disease. And, they say you don't know what you're going to do until you come to that place where you have to make that decision. Because it's easy for people sitting on the outside looking in to say, oh, I wouldn't want to subject my younger child to that risk. But as a mother, you're saying to yourself, but I love all of my children. And if the younger one can help the older one, is it not my obligation to do everything I can for the older child? So this is the decision that had to be made in the case of this particular family, where they had to decide, do we subject our younger child to any possible complications or pain or whatever to help save the life of the older child? This is the decision that they had to make, and this is the decision that they did make, and here are the results. Go ahead.
My name is Belinda Ogude, and I am Malik Ogude's mom. He was born with sickle cell disease. When he was born, I actually didn't really notice anything was off with Malik. The nurse basically said that he has sickle cell. So I said, yeah, I have sickle cell trait, so he probably has the trait too. She said, no, he has the disease. They just spoke about how much pain he would be in and just a whole bunch of things that would be happening to him. I didn't even know what to do. I really lost hope. They said to us, you guys have a program where they're actually doing bone marrow transplants, but it has to be a sibling donor. He only had one sibling, and I knew it would be a really rough road for Michael. He was still young. Of course, first we had to do some tests with Michael. And long story short, he actually turned out to be a perfect match. We had to do a whole bunch of lab tests on Michael to make sure that we'd actually be able to go on with the transplant. When they took Michael in to harvest the bone marrow, it was really hard. I tried to focus on the fact that, we were doing something that was saving Malik's life, and it would be better for all of us as a family. It was really amazing to find out that the transplant was successful.
It was really lucky, and it was really lucky that my brother was a compatible bone marrow donor. I hope he doesn't have to go through that again, or anything like that again. It was like a weight's been lifted off my shoulders. I don't remember much about having sickle cell, but I remember feeling pain then. It was more the pain of when you get hit by a baseball bat or something. I don't have to worry about it anymore. The only pain that I need to worry about is if I stub my toe or something.
After the transplant, we took labs every 2 days. His counts were looking good. the bone marrow was in place and everything was looking fine. Right now, he's back to normal like any other kid. He can take part in any kind of activities at school or anywhere else, but he is still a part of their clinic, and every year he still continues to go back to get checkups just to make sure. If someone is going through something similar, I would tell them to not give up, just keep hope alive. For every visit that we went to the hospital, we were just sitting with bated breath, just waiting for those lab results. They basically determined the course of every day and the actions that the doctors would take after that.
I don't think that they would have found out that Michael was a compatible donor if they hadn't done the test they did, so there's not really a question of if I would be here right now without the lab tests.
I'm pretty certain I couldn't be sitting here with a smile on my face if it wasn't for pathologists, all those people who work in the labs tirelessly. We could have not have come to this place without their hard work.
So that particular story ended well. The young man was a perfect match for the boy was a perfect match for his older brother. They were able to do the bone marrow transplant. There was no rejection on the part of the older brother, and he is now growing up to be a normal kid. So that was good news for them. But again, only 10 to 15% of persons suffering from this disease actually have that type of outcome. Only 10 to 15%. So where does that leave the other 85%? So thank goodness that there are very many new effective treatments that exist. And they're making wonderful strides as it relates to the different way of approaching this. Some of them are really out there in terms of their, what's the word I'm looking for? In terms of their scientific advancement. You would have heard me talk about, those of you who have been following me for quite a while now on these shows that I do. When I had a radio show in another place, I did a particular show on something called CRISPR technology, where you could sort of create you could sort of tailor make the baby that you want by editing genes. So you could decide, I want a child that has blonde hair, blue eyes, is going to grow to be 6 feet tall. And you could edit into their DNA, edit into their genes, what you want them to be. And so it raised these questions as to whether or not human beings are now playing God, whether or not it is ethical and even safe to be playing around with somebody's genes in such a way. But what we see happening with chronic diseases is that same technology is being used to edit genes in such a way that you remove stuff that is not desirable and replace it with something that is. So it's not just a matter of aesthetics or preference, but actually using this technology for good to address chronic diseases like sickle cell. So this is the kind of technology that is available nowadays, that is being used and researched by UCLA and other places that are working towards trying to find a cure that is available for the masses, not just for the 10 to 15% who are able to benefit from the treatment option of the bone marrow transplant. So this is what we're going to be looking at today. Like I said, we are going to examine these new treatment approaches, this new research, the work that they're doing. And when I say new, this isn't something that just happened last week. It's been going on now for at least a year or two, the research into this. And they're getting some very, very positive results. And the hope is that they will be able to scale it to the point where that 85% who are unable to get a bone marrow transplant can benefit. This is the hope and the goal of the research that is now ongoing with regard to sickle cell disease. So this research is trying to improve stem cell transplants for adults with sickle cell disease, as well as identify how genes and other risk factors contribute to pain crisis. However, I am reluctant to say that to buy into the prognosis, or that this is a gene disease or genetic disease, because as you're going to learn a little later on in the show, there are some holes in that theory that ought to be considered. And again, our approach from the naturopathic standpoint is to not just look at what is happening, but what is ground zero? What is the starting point of why that is happening? And 9 times out of 10, we go right back to the same place, which is nutrition. A lack of nutrition or nutritional deficiencies that can trigger certain conditions to develop when the body is not getting what it needs. So we're going to learn a lot more about that as the show goes along. The telephone numbers to call, 3260271, 3260271. If you know anybody who is suffering from this condition, please tell them to tune into GPS today, like and share the show. 3260272, 3260272. And the WhatsApp line for text messages only is 801-0271, 801-0271. So what we're going to do is we're going to take a quick break. And then on the other side of the break, we're going to dive a little bit deeper into this groundbreaking research that is going on. And to see how it could be a benefit for those who are suffering from this debilitating condition known as sickle cell disease or sickle cell anemia. I promise you that by the time we get through this show today, if you are a sufferer, or if your child is suffering from this, or anyone that you know, a loved one, you will walk away from this show with hope, because you will realize that something can be done. Something can be done about this disease. So stay with us. This is GPS. We'll be back after these words from our sponsors.
Your body's immune system is under constant pressure from things like stress, lack of exercise, and toxins in the environment. It's crucial to be proactive and support your immune system with the nutrients it needs to function effectively. But it's often hard to get these nutrients from food alone. Introducing fast-acting Zinc Plus Immune Support by Longevity. Unlike zinc-only supplements, Zinc Plus Immune Support builds on the proven power of zinc and adds complementary nutrients to give your immune system extra support. Vitamin D helps balance the effects of zinc, while our proprietary blend of natural fruit and root extracts provides the extra help your immune system needs to work against daily stressors. And we've included Youngevity's exclusive plant-derived minerals to give your body the minerals it needs but can't get from food alone. And because Zinc Plus Immune Support is delivered in a great-tasting, sugar-free, berry-flavored lozenge, it encourages quicker absorption of all these nutrients into your body. Zinc Plus Immune Support. Zinc plus the extra support your body needs to promote a healthy immune system. To learn more, contact your Youngevity associate.
Welcome to Sunshine Auto, the hardest place on the planet for rims, paints, and tires.
We are your auto superstore for rims, Lexani, Azaras, Trueform, Western, Lux, Fuel, Trackline, Tough, Rough Racing, Velocity, Mud, All-Terrain, and low-profile tires. Cars, homes, and commercial window tinting. At Sunshine Auto, we put God first and customer is king.
Blessed love.
It's gotten harder and harder to get your daily requirement of vital nutrients from food alone. Without additional vitamin and nutrient support, your health and well-being can suffer drastically. That's why Z-Radical was specifically formulated. It combines a blend of antioxidant-rich vitamins, minerals, and botanicals with the protective powers of fucoidan to help fill the gaps from lack of nutrients in your foods. The core of Z-Radical is fucoidan, a naturally occurring polysaccharide that helps stimulate immune reaction, protecting you against inflammation and oxidative stress. We harvest this powerful mineral-rich nutrient from brown seaweed, harvested only from the world's most pristine ocean waters to ensure the purest quality. It's then extracted using cold process technology to ensure maximum levels of bioavailability. Then we add essential vitamins that help to protect your cardiovascular and nervous systems and are crucial for optimal immune and neurological function. Z-Radical also includes a proprietary blend of delicious antioxidant-rich fruits and berries. This great-tasting combination helps your body combat free radical imbalances that can contribute to a variety of degenerative conditions like arthritis and heart disease. Z-Radical. Experience the power of fucoidan with antioxidant-rich berries, 8 essential vitamins, and more to provide you with potent health benefits. To learn more, contact your Youngevity associate.
Welcome back to GPS Global Paradigm Shift on Global 99.5 FM. Michelle Malcolm in your company. And as always, it's a pleasure to be with you today. Thank you so much for tuning in on this Wellness Wednesday. The telephone numbers to call 3260271, 3260271, 3260272, 3260272, 3260272, or the WhatsApp line for text messages only is 8010271, 8010271. That's the text line for WhatsApp. So we're learning that sickle cell anemia is just one of a group of disorders known as sickle cell disease. Okay, so even though you may often hear this referred to as, oh, this person has sickle cell anemia, that is just one of a group of disorders known as sickle cell disease. And as you would have learned, it affects the shape of the red blood cell, which carries oxygen to all parts of the body. And so when that cell sickles and sticks together, it can cause all kinds of problems with blood flow, restriction of oxygen, etc., etc., etc. In sickle cell anemia, once the blood cells, become shaped like crescents or moons, they become rigid and sticky, which slows blood flow. And when those sticky crescent-shaped blood cells start to pile up in the joints, etc., it can cause some serious pain. So symptoms usually appear around 6 months of age, and they vary from person to person and may change over time. But there's a very specific reason as to why a person may be born with this disease, but it doesn't show up until 6 months or later. And I'll take it from here, Jason. As you'll learn in this next clip, that's because babies have a bit of an advantage. And much of the research that is being done now is to figure out how to hold on to that advantage even into adulthood.
We're going to be talking about using stem cells and gene therapy to treat disease. So how do you do that? Well, step one, make sure you have the right genes. The genes you inherit from your mum and dad help determine if you're going to be tall or short, have brown eyes or blue, and can even determine if you're going to be healthy or sick. That's where stem cells and gene therapy come into the picture. To help explain this, we turn to Dr. Donald Cohn from UCLA.
Gene therapy is a group of techniques that have been developed in the last 2 decades or so to treat diseases, not by giving medicines that treat the symptoms, but to really try and get to the root cause.
He's running a clinical trial using a stem cell and gene therapy combination to test a possible cure for sickle cell disease. That's a really nasty, painful condition caused by a single mistake or mutation in a gene.
People with sickle cell have a whole variety of severe medical complications, recurrent pain crises, and ongoing organ damage. And so people with sickle cell currently only live about 40 years.
Sounds awful, doesn't it? It turns out that single DNA mutation changes the shape of our red blood cells so that instead of being round and smooth and flowing easily, they become sickle-shaped and sticky, and they clump together, clogging up our blood vessels.
The approach that we're looking at would be to take the patient's own bone marrow, isolate the stem cells, and in the laboratory put in the gene that we've been working on that prevents the red blood cells from sickling. And so transplanting their own bone marrow back to them, in theory, should be safe. We don't have to worry about rejection.
Seems pretty straightforward, right? Well, not so fast.
The concerns in taking what works in the laboratory to clinic is always the unknowns. So one of the unknowns simply is, can we get enough bone marrow from an adult to make enough stem cells to transplant back to them? Then the big unknown is, how will they do with the transplant? Will they tolerate the treatment, and will it work?
There are no guarantees, of course, but Don has a good track record in this area. Last year, he announced that he had used this same approach to effectively cure a fatal condition called severe combined immunodeficiency. It's also known as bubble baby disease. It's a condition that leaves newborn babies without a functioning immune system. But even as they're trying this approach, the team are already exploring other techniques. One is using something called a zinc finger nuclease. Don't you love that name? It's essentially a pair of molecular scissors that the team is going to use to precisely snip out the defect in the sickle cell gene. You can then add in the correction and patch it all up. This is fascinating work, but it's more than that. It's also opening the door to a whole new kind of medicine and inspiring real hope in people with incurable genetic diseases.
Well, if you ask Dr. Joel Wallach, who we will hear from later on in the show, there's some questions as to whether this truly is a genetic disease, even though the disease results from a mutation in the person's genes. We go back to the question, and even the doctor in that last clip referred to the question that we often ask: what caused it? What caused the mutation? And this is where they are not having much success in figuring out what caused the mutation. They know it's a mutation, but ground zero is what caused it. And that is where I dare say that the cure lies in answering that question. Before we get there, I want to talk more about symptoms of this condition, because you may be going through some of this and not realize that this is perhaps what you are dealing with. And it is important for you to get early diagnosis if you do have the condition, because you're going to have to make some changes to your lifestyle if you do. If you don't, then you will find yourself often suffering from the crisis, ending up in the hospital or worse, possibly death, if you don't learn early enough that this is what, in fact, you may be dealing with or your child may be dealing with. So, again, signs and symptoms of sickle cell anemia usually appear around 6 months of age. And once we get to the next clip, you'll understand why, even though a person may have been born with this condition, it doesn't show up until 6 months of age. We're gonna learn that, I think, in the next clip that we play. But before we get there, we're gonna talk more about the symptoms that a person may experience if they are dealing with sickle cell disease. So again, these symptoms vary from person to person in terms of severity and may change over time, but you need to be aware of what the signs and symptoms can include. So among them are anemia. You may be a person who is anemic, and the doctors may prescribe iron capsules for you, but you need to figure out what is causing you to be anemic. I always say go back to the beginning, the root cause of the problem. Sickle cell breaks apart easily and die. And so red blood cells usually live for about 120 days before they need to be replaced as regular ones. But sickle cells typically die in 10 to 20 days. And so this leaves a shortage of red blood cells, which is known as anemia. And without enough red blood cells, the body just can't get sufficient oxygen, and this can cause fatigue. So if you are a person who is anemic and you're tired all the time, it could be a possibility that you may be dealing with sickle cell disease. Now remember, the symptoms vary in terms of severity. So just because you don't end up in the hospital like some persons do who suffer from this, doesn't mean that this is not something that you should be concerned about. So I come across a lot of people all the time who are anemic, and the doctors can't figure out what's causing them to be anemic. But what they do is they say, oh, just take some iron tablets. But it may be worth your while to do more investigation to rule out that this is not why you are anemic and tired all the time. The pain varies in intensity and can last for up to a few hours, from a few hours to a few days. And some people have only a few pain crises a year. Others have dozens or more a year. And severe pain crisis requires a hospital stay. Some adults and adolescents with sickle cell anemia also have chronic pain, which can result from bone and joint damage, ulcers, and other causes. We have a call on the line. Caller, welcome to GPS.
Michelle.
Hi.
Hi, how are you?
Good, how are you?
I'm okay. I know you're talking about sickle cell and the stem cell. How old do you have to be to get the stem cell?
I don't know. There's a particular age limit. This is right now still in trials. Yeah. So I don't know that it has become wide. You know.
Okay, because I'm a person. I lose my sight due to glaucoma.
Okay.
And I did research on stem cell. I did the application and everything. I was like 57 then, but they told me I was too old.
I don't understand why you would be too old if you're only 57.
Yeah.
Well.
So I couldn't do. They didn't do the stem cell anymore.
Well, the thing is with glaucoma, that is something that you don't need to do stem cells for. That's something that can be dealt with again with nutrition. There's a specific reason why you have glaucoma.
My nerves are damaged. They told me.
Yeah, but that doesn't mean that they can't be repaired with nutrition. That's what I'm trying to tell you.
Mm-hmm.
So again, I'm not talking about glaucoma today. But understand that that is a condition that can be reversed with adequate nutrition. And then you got to change your diet. You got to stop eating stuff that is contributing to the problem.
Could I give you my number to call me?
Leave that with my producer. Don't give out your number over the airwaves, okay? So I'll give your name and number to my producer, and I will get back to you as soon as I can.
Okay, thanks.
All right?
Okay.
You're welcome. So another symptom that you may be experiencing is swelling of the hands and feet. The swelling is caused by sickle cell shaped red blood cells blocking blood circulation into the hands and feet. So if you have always swollen hands or swollen feet, that means that there's something going on that's blocking circulation, most likely. You need to figure out why that is happening. Frequent infections is another symptom, another sign that you may be battling sickle cell disease. Sickle cells can damage the spleen, which increases vulnerability to infections. So infants and children with sickle cell anemia commonly receive vaccinations and antibiotics to prevent potentially life-threatening infections such as pneumonia, because people who are battling this condition often get frequent infections. Again, I want you to hear all of this with the understanding that there is a ground zero in this whole scenario. There is a reason why this is happening. This isn't just happening. That mutation in the gene didn't just happen. There's a reason for that. And I promise you we will get to that reason before the end of the show. Another symptom that you may be experiencing is delayed growth or puberty. Red blood cells provide the body with the oxygen and nutrients needed for growth. You hear that word? Nutrients needed for growth. And a shortage of healthy red blood cells can slow growth in infants and children and delay puberty in teenagers. Okay? Vision problems. Tiny blood vessels that supply the eyes can become plugged. And for our last caller, I suspect that's why you may be having issues with your vision, because of the plugging of those tiny vessels. Doesn't mean that to say that you have sickle cell, because there are other things that can cause the plugging of those vessels, including certain foods that you're eating, and whether or not those blood vessels are restricted because of inflammation, which is making it difficult for the blood to flow. But I tell you with certainty that there are certain things that you can do nutritionally that can unplug those arteries. This may not be something that you hear from mainstream medical professionals, but this is something that we see happen often when it comes to the holistic approach, the naturopathic approach. So vision problems can result from tiny blood vessels that are supplying the eyes becoming plugged with sickle cells. Like I just said, though, there could be another reason why they're plugged. So you just want to rule it out. And this can damage the retina and the portion of the eye that processes visual images and lead to vision problems. So this is why people who have sickle cell disease can sometimes develop vision problems. So you may want to try to get diagnosed if you or your child has symptoms of sickle cell anemia. You need to know what you're dealing with. And this is because children with sickle cell anemia are prone to infections, which often start with a fever and can be life-threatening. And this is why it's important to seek prompt medical attention to get a proper diagnosis. You want to seek emergency care for symptoms of stroke, which is another thing that can develop as a result of having this condition, which include one-sided paralysis or weakness in the face or arms and legs, confusion, difficulty walking or talking, sudden vision changes, unexplained numbness, and severe headache. And, you have to understand that I just heard the other day of a very young woman having a stroke. And people are like, oh my goodness, I don't know what happened. She's so young. You have to understand that when it comes to these conditions, age really has, don't think that this is only something that affects older people or whatever, because that's not the case at all. You could be a very young person, and if you're dealing with this, you could still end up coming down with a stroke. Okay? So this is why it's so important to get diagnosed early so you can know what you're dealing with. So risk factors for a baby to be born with sickle cell anemia: both parents, like we said earlier, must carry a sickle cell gene. And unfortunately, sickle cell anemia most commonly affects people of color, people of African, Mediterranean, and Middle Eastern descent. So complications can include stroke, because the sickle cells can block the blood flow to an area of the brain. And signs of stroke include seizures, weakness or numbness of the arms and legs, sudden speech difficulties, loss of consciousness. And if your child has any of these symptoms, you should seek medical treatment immediately, because, as we all know, a stroke can be fatal. You could have acute chest syndrome, which is a lung infection or sickle cells blocking blood vessels in the lungs that can cause this life-threatening complication, resulting in chest pain, fever, difficulty breathing, and it might require emergency medical treatment. Pulmonary hypertension. People with sickle cell anemia can develop high blood pressure in their lungs, and this complication usually affects adults. Shortness of breath, fatigue are common symptoms of this condition, which again can be fatal. Organ damage, and this is a big one. Sickle cells that block blood flow to organs deprive the affected organs of blood and oxygen, and I want to add one in there, nutrition. And sickle cell anemia, blood is also chronically low in oxygen, and this lack of oxygen-rich blood can damage nerves and organs, including kidneys, liver, and spleen, which again can be fatal. Splenic sequestration. A large number of sickle cells can get trapped in the spleen, causing it to enlarge and possibly causing belly pain on the left side of the body. And this can be life-threatening as well. So parents of children with sickle cell anemia should learn to regularly feel their children's spleen for enlargement. Blindness. Sickle cells can block tiny blood vessels that supply the eyes, and over time, this can lead to blindness. Leg ulcers. Sickle cell anemia can cause painful open sores on the legs. Gallstones. The breakdown of red blood cells produces a substance called, I hope I pronounce this right, bilirubin, and a high level of this in the body can lead to gallstones. Priapism, I'm not sure how to pronounce that. This is a condition that men with sickle cell anemia can have painful, long-lasting erections. Sickle cell can block the blood vessels into the penis, which can lead to impotence over time. Deep vein thrombosis. Sickling of red blood cells can cause blood clots, increasing the risk of a clot lodging in a deep vein, which is what is deep vein thrombosis, or a lung pulmonary embolism, either can cause serious illness or death. Pregnancy complications. Sickle cell anemia can increase the risk of high blood pressure and blood clots during pregnancy, and it can also increase the risk of miscarriage, premature birth, and having low birth weight babies. So, this isn't anything to take lightly. You really need to try to get diagnosed as soon as possible if, in fact, you are dealing with sickle cell disease. So, in spite of all that I just said, I want you to understand that there is hope. And I want you to walk away from this show understanding that with all of these new technologies that are happening, combined with understanding nutrition, which is what we're going to deal with in the last portion of the show, there is hope for persons who are battling with sickle cell disease. Now, one of the things that I mentioned earlier is this new CRISPR technology approach. And CRISPR technology is where you edit the gene to take out what you don't want to be there and replace it with what you do want to be there. And this is being used very effectively in trials in which they're conducting this research to see how this CRISPR technology can be used to combat sickle cell disease. So here now is that clip talking about the research that is ongoing with CRISPR technology.
Every single year, we have at least 300,000 newborns born with sickle cell disease.
The condition can cause sudden pain, as well as long-term joint and organ damage, frequent infections, and anemia. Treatments are limited, and the only curative solution, a stem cell transplant, is not available to everyone with sickle cell. But new treatments are being trialled that could offer hope of a life without symptoms to people with the condition, and they work through gene editing. Over 6 million people are living with sickle cell disease worldwide, 3/4 of them in sub-Saharan Africa. Around 5% of the world's population carries trait genes for hemoglobin disorders, but that figure rises as high as 25% in some regions. 2 parents carrying sickle cell trait have a 1 in 4 chance of having a child with sickle cell disease. Pain is the most common symptom of sickle cell disease. As sickle cells travel through small blood vessels, they can get stuck and clog blood flow, causing what are known as pain crises.
For the past 111 years where we know sickle cell disease exists, we unfortunately have only 4 medications that have been approved by the FDA, and hydroxyurea is the only one that is widely available, but unfortunately not always accessible in patients in Africa, for example. So most of the case, patients will be treated symptomatically for pain, will be treated symptomatically for anemia, will be treated symptomatically for recurrent infection without a definitive treatment.
Until recently, the only curative treatment for sickle cell disease was a stem cell transplant. But this comes with its own risks and requires a bone marrow donor who is a close match to the recipient. But now, new treatments are being developed that could allow anyone with sickle cell disease to lead a symptom-free life.
We are currently treating patients with sickle cell disease and beta thalassemia using a innovative therapy called CRISPR-Cas9 gene editing.
CRISPR-Cas9 is an enzyme that can be targeted to make specific cuts in a cell's DNA.
And this gene editing is used to target a specific gene to allow the stem cells in those patients to produce high levels of fetal hemoglobin.
Researchers are beginning to trial using CRISPR to directly edit the sickle cell mutation. But Haydar Frangoul's group are trying something different.
Interestingly, throughout evolution, babies in utero make high amounts of fetal hemoglobin. Fetal hemoglobin is very efficient in transporting oxygen. When babies are born, they switch from making fetal hemoglobin to making adult hemoglobin, which is hemoglobin A. Hemoglobin A in the situation of sickle cell patients has a mutation in it. In utero, babies do not experience any sickle cell crisis or complications related to their disease. And what we know is that this BCL11A gene is what is making that switch. Think about it as a switch.
BCL11A tells your stem cells to stop producing fetal hemoglobin. By targeting it with CRISPR, this treatment switches fetal hemoglobin production back on.
We know for a fact that patients with sickle cell disease, for example, who have persistent high fetal hemoglobin, and there are populations, specifically in Western Africa and in Saudi Arabia, that persist to have high levels of fetal hemoglobin. And those patients do not experience significant complications related to their sickle cell disease, and some of them are completely asymptomatic. So what we are trying to do is we are trying to make the cells make high number of fetal hemoglobin, and that fetal hemoglobin can stabilize the red blood cell and prevent it from sickling.
And this trial is already showing exciting results for people like Jimmy. He had his stem cells harvested, gene edited with CRISPR, and re-implanted back into his body, where they started producing fetal hemoglobin.
Usually once a day, I'll buzz my nurse to help me out with pain medication, and she'll bring something. And I didn't need that anymore. All of a sudden, I didn't need pain medication. I wanted to get up. One of the weirdest things, my eyes, usually because of sickle cell, you break down a lot of red blood cells, and then it shows in your eyes with the bilirubin, and your eyes become yellow. My eyes became white.
The 7 patients that received this treatment all have benefited from it and have not experienced any sickle cell related complications after the treatment.
This treatment can't repair damage that sickle cell disease has already caused, but it could prevent new problems from even arising. Unfortunately, it's very expensive. Transporting an individualized therapy like this from a trial setting to where it is needed most around the world will be an enormous challenge.
Yeah, it all comes back down to money. It's very, very expensive. So everybody won't be able to afford this. And they are still trying to figure out ways to do the same thing, but in a less expensive way so that it can become more affordable and not just available to those who have long dollars. So there's more research to be done as to how to make that happen. The good news is there are some things that you can do holistically. And that's what we're going to be talking about on the other side of the break. We are going to be looking at what could possibly be ground zero in this whole thing. And what are some of the things that you could be doing at home to help you to overcome this as best as possible, or to prevent it from happening for your future children. Stay with us. This is GPS.
Blood sugar levels play a key role in your appetite, weight gain, and overall health. When you have a blood sugar spike, you can feel confused, dizzy, and even have increased cravings. Eating carbohydrates, sugary or fatty foods, and not exercising can all cause blood sugar spikes. But now you have help in managing blood sugar levels. Sweeties by Youngevity was designed to help support healthy blood sugar levels so you can power through your day. It's a synergistic blend of minerals, herbs, and nutrients that have been proven to support healthy blood sugar levels. Sweeties includes chromium, an essential trace mineral that's known for its contribution to healthy blood sugar levels and improved metabolism of carbohydrates, fats, and proteins. Cinnamon bark has been included for its naturally occurring antioxidants and support of a healthy heart. And we've even added gymnema, It's been used in Ayurveda for centuries to help promote healthy blood sugar. All the ingredients in Sweeties work together to give the best support available for blood sugar control. Sweeties, the blood sugar support supplement from Youngevity that helps control cravings and manage blood sugar levels through your day. To learn more, contact your Youngevity associate.
Welcome to Sunshine Auto, the hardest place on the planet for rims, paints, and tires.
We are your auto superstore for rims, Lexani, Azaras, Trueform, Western, Lux, Fuel, Tracklight, Tough, Rough Racing, Velocity, Mud, All-Terrain, and low-profile tires. Cars, homes, and commercial window tinting. At Sunshine Auto, we put God first and customer is king.
Blessed love.
As you age, factors like health, weight, diet, and lifestyle can all impact your bones, joints, and general mobility. Even everyday exercise can lead to wear and tear on your body. Over time, you might start to experience stiffness or pain due to damaged joints or connective tissue. Ultimate Glucogel by Youngevity was created to help you limit the effects of wear on your joints. It delivers a daily dose of collagen-rich gelatin your body needs for joint elasticity and maintenance. Ultimate Glucogel contains a 1-to-1 ratio of gelatin and glucosamine sulfate, which is a key building block of your bone matrix, cartilage, ligaments, tendons, and connective tissue. Gelatin's unique blend of amino acids not only help with muscle and joint health, but also has been shown to provide additional benefits for the brain, skin, and hair. Ultimate Glucogel. Natural, optimal daily support for joint health. To learn more, contact your Youngevity associate.
Welcome back to GPS Global Paradigm Shift on Global 99.5 FM. Michelle Malcolm here on this Wellness Wednesday. We are talking about sickle cell disease. The telephone numbers to call 3260271, 3260271, 3260272, 3260272, and the WhatsApp line for text messages only 8010271, 8010271. Just making sure that I'm not missing any messages here. Okay. All right. So we are talking about all of these new technologies that new techniques that are being studied and researched as to how to bring relief to persons who are battling with sickle cell disease. And all of it is very, very, very promising. But as you would have learned, some of it is either too expensive for the masses to take advantage of, or in some cases, the odds are that you may not be able to take advantage of the information or the technology because you aren't able to find a match, an adequate bone marrow match. As we would have discussed, only 15%, 10 to 15% of people fall within that category. And whereas these treatments like the CRISPR technology approach are, more effective for more people, they're too expensive. So, it's like, how the saying go? I'd go 6 and 1/2 a dozen the other. In other words, you have one that works, but it's only 10 to 15% of people that it can work for. You have another one that is promising, but it's so expensive that the other 85% won't be able to afford it anyway. So what do? Well, the first thing we need to do is we need to figure out what is causing this. What is causing the mutation in the gene that causes those blood cells to become sickle shape as opposed to the shape that they are supposed to be? And it goes right back to ground zero. that we often speak about here on Wellness Wednesday, and that is ensuring that your body gets adequate nutrition. As you all should know by now, we believe that the body is an incredibly intelligent healing machine that knows what to do to fix itself, wants to fix itself, is trying to fix itself, but needs building blocks to do so. And the challenge that many of us face in today's fast-paced world with all of the stresses and the toxins and the genetically modified foods and the modern farming techniques that are stripping our foods of the nutrients that they should have. Many people are coming down with these chronic diseases, not because of aging or bad luck or even genes, but because of nutritional deficiencies. So I want you to imagine that, your body needs to have these building blocks in order to function. And that is especially true for a woman who is carrying a child, because that embryo is going to draw from you everything that it needs. This is why women who are pregnant, oftentimes they start having problems with calcium levels if they're not getting adequate calcium in the diets, because that baby's sucking all the calcium that it needs. That baby's going to get what it needs, and leave you depleted if you're not adequately supplementing as you go through pregnancy. But there are some bad things that can pass on to the child as well if you are not getting adequate nutrition during pregnancy. And so at the center of the whole question of why is this happening, we go right back to where we always do when we look at the holistic approach, and that is nutritional deficiencies. And again, I want you to listen with an open mind, because you're not necessarily going to hear this from mainstream medical professionals. But they will have to admit that whereas they understand what is happening as it relates to sickle cell, they still don't know why. So maybe, just maybe, we should take a different approach. Listen to this.
MDs practice allopathic medicine. The allopathic view is that sickle cell anemia is genetic, that it is caused by a mutation of a gene, and it is an inherited disorder referred to as autosomal recessive. It is a mutation in a particular gene on a chromosome. That's their belief. But in allopathic reductionistic MD circles, the only treatment that's ever been shown to cure sickle cell anemia is a bone marrow transplant, because red blood cells are made in the bone marrow. But when they do a bone marrow transplant, they don't take all of the marrow everywhere in your body out. They take just a little piece out of your long bones, and they put it back. They put somebody else's marrow in there, and that will most of the time eliminate the sickle cell condition if you get it soon enough in kids. But if that's the case, then it can't be an inherited genetic disorder. Because if it were an inherited genetic disorder, you'd still have sickle cells being produced by your blood, your bone marrow, and non-sickle cells produced by the transplanted bone marrow, and it doesn't make sense. So here's the holistic view of how sickle cell anemia happens. It is, in fact, a mutation in the hemoglobin gene. But the mutation in the hemoglobin gene is not a genetic, it's not because there's a bad gene. It's not like there's a gene that codes for sickle cell anemia. There's a chromosome that's become broken. There's genetic material that's become damaged. There's genetic material that's become mutated because of lack of nutrition. So when a particular area of a particular chromosome doesn't have enough selenium, copper, or vitamin B12, the chromosomal material becomes damaged. And when the chromosomal material becomes damaged, it can't make red blood cells the way that nature intended it to. It's not a gene. It's an area of chromosomal damage. There's a big difference. In patients that have sickle cell anemia, they have things called crises, sickle cell crises, which bring them to the hospital 3, 4, or 5 times a year. What does the medical doctor do? Well, they do heroic medicine that they're good at. You know, they can save the spleen from exploding, right? They can save the kidney from failing. But they can't fix the cause of this. It's not a gene. It's a defect in a chromosome based on lack of nutrients. Here's how we know this. Well, my colleague, Dr. Joel Wallach, was in charge of $25 million of research from 1970 to 1982. They did 26,000 autopsies. And the result of all of this research was a scientific research publication called The Diseases of Exotic Animals, which is now in the Smithsonian Institute. And one of the things that Wallach noticed when he was doing this was that white-tailed deer showed up with an illness called white muscle disease. White muscle disease, the veterinarian community knows, is eliminated by selenium. It's a simple selenium deficiency, selenium being a trace mineral. So these deer also had sickled red blood cells, just coincidentally. And when Wallach gave the deer selenium, an injection of selenium to fix the white muscle disease, the sickle cells vanished. If it was genetic, this would not have been able to have happened, but it did. And this led the way for Dr. Wallach's understanding of the pathogenesis of the sickle cell trait. So from the medical nutritional point of view, sickle cell anemia is caused by a deficiency in copper, selenium, and vitamin B12. Copper, selenium, and vitamin B12. And when your body doesn't have enough copper, selenium, or vitamin B12, especially if your mother, while you're developing in utero, doesn't have enough copper, selenium, or vitamin B12, the genes that code for healthy red blood cells get damaged. And then you're born with damaged chromosomes, which are to a certain extent baked into the cake. So you're always going to be having sickle cells. But if you supplement aggressively with B12, copper, and selenium, you can dramatically reduce the number of cells that are sickled in the blood and eliminate the hospital crises that send sickle cell patients to the hospital.
I don't know about you, but when I first heard this, mind blown. Could it be something as simple as a nutritional deficiency that is ground zero is the root cause of this? Something as simple as selenium, copper, and B12? No way. I know what you're saying. No way. Can't be. But what if it is? See, I keep telling y'all, you only could share what you know. And if you don't know something, then you should not be expected to pass on knowledge of something you do not know. And whereas there's been this tremendously encouraging research that we would have heard about all through this show about how to fix this problem using stem cell, gene replacement therapy, etc. That's all well and good. But could it be where if we take a simple approach of ensuring that we're giving our bodies what they need to function, meaning nutrition, and again, I'm talking high grade nutrition here. I'm not talking the crap you buy over the counter. That is 9 times out of 10 formulated from minerals in their raw state, which means you can't break it down. I know I sound like a Scotch record, but just in case it's somebody here new. So I'm not talking that crappy stuff that you buy over the counter. I'm talking medical grade therapeutic nutrition. Could it be that something as simple as selenium, copper, and B12 could provide the answer to all of this? And if that is the case, why aren't there more studies being done to follow that trend, to follow that line of thinking? Well, it goes back, I believe, to the question of money, because you can't make the kind of money from selenium, copper, and B12 that you can from editing somebody's genes. So is this a question of money? Again, people, I want you to understand that you should always, always believe the diagnosis, but don't believe the prognosis. Because oftentimes the prognosis is given to you based on a lack of knowledge. You can only share what you know. And if you have not been trained in nutrition, then you can't be expected to understand how nutrition works in the elimination of disease. You just can't. So understand that no matter what condition you're facing, there's always a ground zero. There's always a root cause of what caused the thing to go wrong in the first place. And if there's a mutation in the gene, which we know that there is when it comes to sickle cell, nobody's denying that. The smarter approach, I would think, would be to figure out what caused the mutation, as opposed to saying, well, let's just fix the mutation. What caused it? Because if we can figure that out, then we can prevent future incidences of this disease and any other disease that is grounded and rooted in nutritional deficiencies. It's that simple. We overcomplicate, I think, things when it comes to health and healing. We make it a lot more complicated than it needs to be. And sometimes the answer is just some simple changes. Simple things like adding certain nutrients to your diet, making sure that you're getting adequate high-grade nutrition, making sure that you're not eating damaging foods or doing things that are damaging your body. Simple things. But no, that's too simple for us. We got to overcomplicate everything. So in this final clip that I'm going to play, Dr. Joel Wallach himself talks about how he stumbled across the information that Dr. Peter Glidden would have just referenced in that last clip. Dr. Wallach talks about how he stumbled across this information and what you need to know as to how you can benefit from the knowledge that he understands that most persons within the medical professions does not. So here now is the final clip for the show.
I actually started out with sickle cell anemia in white-tailed deer, and they wrote it up in the book that's in the Smithsonian Institute. 20,000 autopsies, some 17,000, some change, and over 454 species of zoo animals and 3,000 humans. 10 million chemistries, 10 million slides with special stains. And one of the diseases we looked at in animals was sickle cell anemia. And we learned that we could either manage it or reverse it by supplementing with all 90 essential nutrients plus extra selenium. In humans, I've learned since 1991, began to work with the Sickle Cell Foundation of Georgia, the now late Phil Oliver. He was the genetic counselor for them, and he asked me if what I had reported in animals, in deer, would work in humans. I said yes. And of course, we've been working with them since 1991. And we wouldn't claim a cure, but certainly you can manage it much better than has previously been done using sweet potatoes and all that kind of stuff. It is just an amazing thing. You take the 90 essential nutrients, you get on a gluten-free diet, take our extra selenium, and say for 100 pounds of body weight, 1 Healthy Start pack per month, and you throw in the extra selenium, say 2 twice a day per 100 pounds of body weight, absolutely gluten-free. And there's no reason why anybody should have attacks, outbreaks, or death from sickle cell anymore. And Linus Pauling, of course, was able to identify unusual proteins in the hemoglobin, but guess what? It never was proven to be genetic. It's not genetic. In non-African Americans, in white people, as opposed to black people, it's called thalassemia. In black people, it's called sickle cell. They're related diseases.
Can you imagine? He often talks about it, same disease, different name. Because when they discovered that the same condition was happening in white people, they had already publicized the misconception that only black people got this disease. So they couldn't call the disease sickle cell for white people because they had already put out there that this was a disease of black people. So they call it something else. But for all intents and purposes, it's the same thing. So people, understand that you can do something about this. And one of the first things that you need to do is making sure, especially if you are pregnant or looking to have a child, that you are getting adequate, and especially if you are a person who has the trait, make sure that you are getting adequate nutrition in your diet. Don't rely on foods only, because it's impossible to get everything you need from food alone. And we've gone over why several times in the show. Make sure that you are getting the 90 nutrients that your body needs. Make sure that you're getting adequate amounts of selenium and copper and B12. And I'm not saying that you should run out there and go buy all the copper and selenium and B12 off the shelves. It doesn't work that way. That's what you call fractionated nutrition. Your body needs all 90 nutrients. But in this particular condition, it's important that included in that 90 nutrients is selenium, copper, and B12. And if you already have the condition, then you want to beef up what you can do. Beef up the amount of selenium, copper, and B12 that you get in your diet. Now, I had a site pulled up on my phone to give you guys information about what you can do at home holistically. And I lost the page. Let me see if I can find that real quick. But there are some things that you can do in addition to taking the nutrients to, make sure that you're not making yourself susceptible to having crisis. And I'm trying to find that information. I'm sure that if you go online, you all like to go online to, spend a lot of time doing other things. But if you're suffering from this, maybe you want to spend some time looking at what you can do holistically to minimize the chances of you having an event that is going to land you in the hospital. So the first thing you need to do is make sure you're getting adequate nutrition. We've covered that. You want to pay attention to your emotional health because unfortunately there are stigmas associated with sickle cell anemia, and sometimes these stigmas can cause people to have depression or anxiety, which is not good. So you want to take care of your emotional health, make sure that you're in a good place mentally. You want to avoid stress as much as possible. Whereas exercise is important, you don't want to overdo it, okay? To the point where you can cause yourself to have a challenge. Try as much as possible to prevent infections. Okay, so don't, try to stay healthy, in other words. Eat a healthy diet. Make sure that you're eating a balanced diet, you're getting sufficient good, clean water every day, and you're getting the 90 nutrients that your body needs every day. Manage your environment. You need to maintain a balanced body temperature to avoid acute pain, crisis, and it's important that you avoid getting too hot or too cold. Get support because sickle cell anemia is a disease that most people don't understand. People don't understand what it's like to live with this. And so you want to find a support group so that you have that, somebody to fall back on who gets it. And listen out for new developments as it relates to these clinical trials. All right. But most importantly, of all of that, is you want to make sure you're getting good nutrition. 60 minerals, 16 vitamins, 12 essential amino acids, 3 essential fatty acids. Make sure you beef up, but not overdoing it with regard to selenium, copper, and B12. And just for the record, a really good source of selenium is Brazil nuts. Brazil nuts is an excellent source of selenium. So you might want to go to the store and get some Brazil nuts to incorporate in your diet. Understand that there is hope. So just because you've been diagnosed with this or your child is battling it doesn't mean that there's no hope. Do what you need to do. Take care of your body. Nutrify your body. And then call me and tell me about the results. All right? Elridge Gardner is asking, where can you get the 90 nutrients? Elridge, I am going to reach out to you on Facebook. I'll respond to your message there. And then you and I can talk. All right? My time is gone, folks. Thank you so much for tuning in on this Wellness Wednesday. I hope you got something out of this, especially if you are a sufferer of this disease. Know that there is hope. It's 4 o'clock. I'm Michelle Malcolm. I will see you guys. Don't miss tomorrow's show because we're going deep, 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 deep. Don't miss tomorrow's show. All right? I'll see you guys tomorrow. Take care.
Global 99.5 FM reminds our listeners that the views and opinions expressed on this show are those of the host and guests and not necessarily the opinions of the owners of Global Communications Network and the operators of this radio station.